The massive war chamber aboard the hegemony flagship, Dominator's Pride, hummed with tension as 12 species representatives gathered around the holographic display. Admiral Zethrak of the Korthani Empire slammed his scaled fist on the metal table, causing smaller delegates to flinch backward. The humans have expanded into 17 more systems this cycle, Zethrak growled, his yellow eyes burning with anger. Their mining operations are bleeding resources from sectors we claimed centuries ago. This ends now. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled aliens. The Vex delegation clicked their mandibles in harmony, while the crystalline Ashanti chimed musical notes of approval. Only one figure remained silent in the corner, General Varix of the Terran border conflicts, a scarred veteran whose left arm had been replaced with mechanical prosthetics. "The Hegemony Council has voted," announced Counselor Nexus, the spider-like arachnoid leader. "Operation Cleansing Dawn will commence in 48 standard hours. We will strike simultaneously at 5 human colonies, starting with their weakest settlements. Once we demonstrate our overwhelming force, the remaining human worlds will surrender without resistance." The other delegates cheered, but General Varix slowly rose from his seat. His artificial arm whirred softly as he activated the chamber's main display. Footage began playing, grainy recordings from previous conflicts with human forces. "I have fought the humans," Varix said quietly, his voice cutting through the celebration. "I have watched entire fleets disappear into their territory, never to return. I have seen what they do to those who attack their civilians." Admiral Zethrak laughed harshly. "One aging general's fears will not stop the might of the hegemony. You fought small human patrol groups, not our combined armadas." "I fought their third fleet at Kepler Station," Varix replied, his mechanical fingers tapping against his leg, a nervous habit he had developed after losing his organic arm. 3,000 hegemony ships against 400 human vessels. We outnumbered them 7-1. "And?" Counselor Nexus demanded. 47 hegemony ships escaped," Varix said. "I commanded one of them." The chamber fell silent. Several delegates exchanged worried glances, but Admiral Zethrak waved dismissively. "Impossible. No species in the galaxy can achieve such kill ratios." "Your records must be corrupted." Varix limped to the display controls and brought up tactical recordings. The footage showed space filled with wreckage, twisted metal from thousands of alien vessels floating among the stars like a mechanical graveyard. "The humans do not fight like us," Varix explained. "We follow standard fleet tactics, organized formations, conventional strategies, predictable patterns. The humans, they fight like their homeworld shaped them. They adapt instantly to every situation. They use our strengths against us and exploit weaknesses we didn't know we had." He enhanced the display to show specific battle sequences. Human ships moved in impossible patterns, appearing to break the basic rules of space combat. Their formations shifted constantly, never maintaining the same configuration for more than minutes at a time. "Watch this engagement," Varix said, highlighting a section where human destroyers somehow outmaneuvered much larger hegemony cruisers. Their ships are smaller, supposedly weaker, but they use gravitational fields, asteroid debris, even the radiation from nearby stars as weapons. They turned our own numerical advantage into a disadvantage by forcing us to fight in confined spaces where our larger ships couldn't maneuver effectively. The Vex delegation leader, Commander Zix, clicked his mandibles skeptically. "Tactical innovation cannot overcome pure numerical superiority. Our new fleet carries planet-killer weapons." "The humans have faced planet killers before," Varix replied grimly. "At the Proxima incident, the Zephyrian Empire brought a mooncracker cannon. The humans captured it intact and turned it against the Zephyrian fleet. Within 6 hours, the entire Zephyrian invasion force was space dust." He switched to another recording, this one showing a massive alien weapon being somehow redirected by much smaller human vessels. The beam that was meant to destroy a human colony instead carved through the attacking fleet's flagship. But that's not even the worst part, Varix continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. The worst part is what happens when you try to retreat. Admiral Zethrak stood up, his massive frame towering over the general. No army in galactic history has been able to prevent strategic withdrawal. There are always escape routes. Not from humans, Varix said firmly. They call it aggressive pursuit doctrine. Once you attack their civilians, once you threaten their colonies, they will hunt you across the galaxy. There is no distance too great, no hideout too remote. They will find you. He brought up star charts showing shipping lanes and trade routes throughout the galaxy. Red markers indicated the locations of destroyed alien bases and fleets. After Kepler Station, I tried to retreat to the neutral zone. Human hunter-killer groups followed me for 8 months. They didn't just pursue my remaining ships. They systematically destroyed every supply depot, every safe harbor, every ally who had helped the invasion force. By the time we reached what we thought was safety, we had nothing left. No fuel, no ammunition, no hope. The crystalline Ashanti representative chimed nervously. Surely they cannot maintain such operations indefinitely. The logistics alone would be impossible. That's what we told ourselves, Varix replied. But humans don't think about logistics the way we do. Their ships can operate independently for months using improvised resources. They can manufacture ammunition from asteroid mining. They can jury-rig repairs using salvaged materials. Most terrifying of all, they can survive on planets that would kill any of us within hours. He displayed images of human colonies on worlds that looked impossibly hostile. Planets with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, radiation levels that would be lethal to most galactic species. They call themselves Deathworlders for a reason, Varix explained. Their homeworld is a nightmare of natural disasters, predators, diseases, and environmental extremes. Every human is basically a trained survivor from birth. When you back them into a corner, when you threaten their families and homes, you're not fighting soldiers. You're fighting an entire species that evolved to survive impossible odds. Counselor Nexus's compound eyes glittered with growing uncertainty. Assuming your reports are accurate, what do you recommend? Don't attack the humans, Varix said simply. Find another way to resolve the territorial disputes, negotiate, trade, form alliances, but do not, under any circumstances, launch military operations against human civilian populations. Admiral Zethrak's scaled face twisted with rage. Coward. You would have the mighty hegemony bow before these upstart primates? We have spent cycles preparing this operation. Our fleets are positioned. Our allies are committed. We will not be deterred by one general's defeat. Then you will learn what I learned, Varix said sadly. You will discover why humans have never lost a war where their civilians were targeted. You will understand why every species that has tried to exterminate humanity has ended up extinct themselves. He pulled up one final image, a memorial wall listing the names of extinct civilizations, the Zephyrian Empire, the Mordak Collective, the Silicon Lords of Vega Prime. All had attempted large-scale attacks on human colonies. All had vanished from the galaxy within a decade. The humans have a saying, Varix concluded. They say that humanity's greatest weakness is that they cannot leave things alone. But in war, this becomes their greatest strength. They will not stop, will not rest, will not show mercy until every threat to their people has been eliminated completely. The chamber remained quiet for long moments. Finally, Admiral Zethrak spoke again, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The operation has been approved by the High Council. Even if we wanted to cancel it, the political consequences would be severe. Too many resources have been committed, too many promises made to our allies. I understand, Varix said, moving toward the exit. I've delivered my warning. I've shown you the evidence. What happens next is your choice. As the general reached the door, Counselor Nexus called out, "Where are you going?" Varix paused without turning around. "As far from human space as possible. When Operation Cleansing Dawn begins, I want to be somewhere the humans will never find me. I suggest you all consider doing the same." After the general left, the remaining delegates sat in uncomfortable silence. The confidence that had filled the room earlier was gone, replaced by doubt and growing fear. Admiral Zethrak finally spoke. "One general's paranoia will not stop the hegemony. The humans may be tactically innovative, but they cannot overcome the combined might of 12 species. We have superior numbers, better technology, and the element of surprise." But even as he said the words, Zethrak found himself staring at the memorial wall Varix had shown them. Species after species that had underestimated humanity. Civilizations that had believed themselves superior, only to disappear into the cosmic graveyard of history. "The operation proceeds as planned," Counselor Nexus announced, but his voice carried none of its usual authority. "All fleets will begin final preparations immediately." As the delegates filed out to return to their ships, none of them noticed the small listening device that had been recording their entire conversation. Deep in human space, intelligence analysts were already reviewing the footage, analyzing the alien fleet movements, and preparing humanity's response. The humans knew what was coming. They had been expecting it for months. And as General Varix had tried to warn the hegemony, when humans had time to prepare for an attack on their civilians, the results were never pretty for the attackers. Operation Cleansing Dawn would indeed begin in 48 hours, exactly as the aliens planned, but it would end very differently than they expected. Admiral Zethrak stood on the bridge of the Dominator's Pride as Operation Cleansing Dawn commenced exactly as scheduled. Before him, the tactical display showed 5 massive hegemony fleets dropping out of faster-than-light travel simultaneously across human space. Each fleet contained over 600 ships, cruisers, destroyers, and the mighty dreadnoughts that had conquered dozens of species. "All fleets report successful transition," announced Communications Officer Vext. "Target systems are in range. Enemy forces detected are minimal, exactly as intelligence predicted." Zethrak smiled grimly. The humans had been caught completely off guard. Their colonies showed only standard defensive patrols, perhaps 50 ships total across all 5 target systems. The numerical advantage was overwhelming. Nearly 4,000 hegemony vessels against barely 200 human defenders. "Begin Phase 1, Zethrak commanded. "Target military installations first. We want their surrender, not their martyrdom." Across space, the hegemony fleets opened fire. Energy beams and missile barrages streaked toward human defensive platforms and patrol ships. It should have been a massacre lasting only minutes. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships didn't retreat or attempt to form defensive lines. They scattered in all directions, moving in patterns that seemed random but somehow kept them just ahead of the incoming fire. Missiles that should have connected with their targets struck empty space. Energy beams meant to disable human vessels found nothing but vacuum. "What's happening?" Zethrak demanded as his tactical officer struggled with the displays. "The humans they're not following standard evasion protocols," Lieutenant Thorax replied, his voice confused. "Their ships are operating independently, but somehow their movements are perfectly coordinated. They're predicting our firing solutions before we complete them." On the main screen, Zethrak watched a human destroyer somehow slip between 2 converging missile spreads that should have caught it in an inescapable crossfire. The ship then vanished behind a cloud of metallic debris that hadn't been there moments before. "Sir," called the sensor operator, "we're detecting massive electromagnetic interference throughout the combat zone. The humans appear to be deploying some kind of electronic countermeasures." "Impossible," Zethrak snorted. "Our sensors are military grade. No primitive human technology could—" His words were cut off as proximity alarms screamed throughout the bridge. The main display showed 6 human ships emerging from what had appeared to be empty space, less than 5 kilometers from the hegemony flagship. "All weapons, fire at those ships!" Zethrak roared. But before his gunners could target the human vessels, they opened fire first, not at the Dominator's Pride, but at specific points along its hull. The attack seemed almost surgical, targeting sensor arrays, communication equipment, and weapon control systems. Within seconds, the mighty flagship found itself effectively blind and deaf. Half its weapons were offline, and its sensors showed only static. "How did they get so close without being detected?" Zethrak demanded. "Unknown, sir. They seem to have used our own sensor shadows against us. They approached from angles where our larger ships were blocking our own detection systems." Across the fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships appeared where they shouldn't be, struck with precision that seemed impossible, then vanished back into sensor shadows and electromagnetic interference clouds. Zethrak switched to fleet-wide communications, hoping to coordinate a response, but found the channels filled with panicked reports from his captains. "Enemy vessels moving at impossible velocities. They're using asteroids as shields and weapons simultaneously. Request immediate support. We are taking heavy casualties. How are they reloading their weapons so quickly?" The Admiral tried to make sense of the chaos, but the tactical situation was deteriorating faster than he could process. According to the displays, his forces were losing ships at an alarming rate, while the human defenders seemed to be multiplying. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we're detecting massive reinforcement fleets approaching all 5 target systems. Human vessels numbering in the thousands." "Impossible!" Zethrak snapped. "Our reconnaissance showed minimal human presence in these sectors. Where did they come from?" "Unknown, sir. They appear to have been hiding in planetary rings, asteroid fields, and behind gas giant moons. Our sensors never detected them because they were running completely dark. No power signatures, no emissions." The truth was dawning on Zethrak with growing horror. The humans hadn't been caught off guard at all. They had been waiting, prepared, ready to spring a trap that the hegemony had walked directly into. "Get me a status report from all fleet commanders," he ordered. The reports that came back painted a picture of complete tactical disaster. The Second Fleet, attacking the agricultural colony at Demeter's Garden, had lost 60% of its ships to human vessels that seemed to materialize from the planet's own atmosphere. The Third Fleet at New Brisbane was being systematically picked apart by human ships, using the local asteroid belt as both cover and ammunition. The Fourth Fleet reported that the humans were somehow turning the hegemony's own weapons against them, capturing missile systems and redirecting them back at their original launchers. But it was the report from the Fifth Fleet that made Zethrak's blood turn cold. "Admiral," came the terrified voice of Commander Relac, "the humans at New Geneva, they're not just defending the colony, they're hurting us. Every time we try to retreat or regroup, they appear in our path. Every time we attempt to establish a new formation, they force us into tighter and tighter areas. It's like they're gathering us together for something." Zethrak felt his scales go cold. He had heard similar reports before in the classified files from previous conflicts with humanity, reports that most hegemony officers dismissed as exaggeration or cowardice. "All fleets, initiate immediate withdrawal," he commanded. "Return to jump coordinates and prepare for faster-than-light retreat." But as his own fleet tried to break off from the engagement, the human ships didn't let them go. Instead of allowing the typical disengagement that characterized most galactic warfare, the human vessels pressed their attack even more aggressively. "Sir," his navigation officer reported, "we cannot reach minimum safe distance for FTL jump. Human forces are maintaining close engagement range." "Then fight through them!" "We're trying, sir, but they're matching our movements perfectly. Every time we pull back, they advance. Every time we change course, they're already there waiting for us." Zethrak realized with growing terror that General Varix's warnings had been accurate. The humans weren't just defending their colonies, they were ensuring that the attacking forces couldn't escape. On the tactical display, he watched as human ships herded hegemony vessels like predators driving prey. The alien ships found themselves pushed into increasingly disadvantageous positions, trapped against planets, moons, and asteroid fields with no room to maneuver. "Communications," Zethrak ordered. "Open a channel to the human forces. We need to discuss terms." "Sir, the humans are not responding to any surrender requests. They're jamming all diplomatic frequencies." The Admiral stared at his displays in disbelief. In centuries of galactic warfare, no species had ever refused to accept surrender. It was one of the fundamental rules of civilized conflict. But as he watched his fleets being systematically cornered and destroyed, Zethrak began to understand something terrible about humanity. They didn't follow the civilized rules of war. They followed older, more primal laws, the laws of a species that had evolved on a world where showing mercy to threats often meant death. "All ships, emergency dispersal pattern," he commanded. "Scatter in all directions. Some of us must escape to warn the hegemony." But even as he gave the order, Zethrak knew it was already too late. The human ships had positioned themselves perfectly to block every possible escape route. The trap was complete. From his position on the bridge, Admiral Zethrak could see human vessels moving with a coordination that seemed impossible. They weren't just individual ships working together. They were like a single organism with thousands of parts, each one knowing exactly what every other part was doing. "Sir," his tactical officer reported quietly, "long-range sensors are detecting additional human fleets moving to seal off the outer system. Even if we break through the immediate forces, there are more ships waiting at every possible jump point." The Admiral felt his confidence finally crack completely. General Varix had been right about everything. The humans weren't just tactically superior. They were absolutely ruthless when their civilians were threatened. There would be no mercy, no quarter, no opportunity for honorable retreat. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked quietly. "Across all fleets, approximately 70% and climbing, sir." 70%. In less than 6 hours of combat. Against an enemy they had outnumbered 8-1 at the beginning of the engagement. Zethrak looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They all understood now what they were facing. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was an execution. The humans had decided that the hegemony needed to learn a lesson about attacking human civilians, and that lesson was going to be written in the wreckage of 4,000 alien ships. "Send a message to Hegemony Command," Zethrak ordered, his voice hollow with defeat. "Tell them that General Varix was right. Tell them that humanity is not like other species. Tell them that if they ever threaten human civilians again, there will be nowhere in the galaxy to hide." As he spoke, proximity alarms began sounding again. More human ships were approaching, and this time they weren't bothering with the surgical precision they had shown earlier. These vessels were moving with the deliberate purpose of predators closing in for the kill. The great admiral who had conquered 17 species looked out at the approaching human fleet and finally understood what General Varix had tried to tell them. When humans decided you were a threat to their people, you weren't just fighting an enemy. You were facing a force of nature that would pursue you to the ends of the galaxy. And in the cold vacuum of space around 5 human colonies, Operation Cleansing Dawn was about to become Operation Last Stand. The final phase of Operation Cleansing Dawn lasted exactly 14 minutes. Admiral Zethrak watched helplessly as the remaining hegemony ships were systematically destroyed around him. The human forces had stopped their careful surgical attacks and shifted to something far more terrifying: methodical annihilation. Every alien vessel that tried to surrender was ignored. Every ship that attempted to flee was hunted down with relentless efficiency. "Sir," his communications officer reported with a trembling voice, "we're receiving a transmission from the human forces. Audio only." "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its casual tone. Admiral Zethrak of the Hegemony Forces. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the 3rd Human Defense Fleet. Your forces have committed acts of aggression against civilian populations in 5 human systems. Under the Terran defense codes, you have forfeited all rights to quarter or mercy. Zethrak tried to respond, but Admiral Chen continued speaking. You may be wondering why we're not accepting your surrender. The reason is simple. The hegemony must learn that attacking human civilians carries consequences that cannot be negotiated away. Your entire invasion force will be destroyed as an example to others who might consider similar actions. You can't do this, Zethrak protested. The Galactic Conventions clearly state. The Galactic Conventions were written by species that never faced extinction, Admiral Chen interrupted. Humanity learned long ago that mercy shown to those who target civilians only encourages more attacks on civilians. This lesson will be taught once, completely, so it never needs to be repeated. Around the Dominator's Pride, the last of the hegemony escort vessels exploded in brilliant flashes of vaporized metal and atmosphere. The flagship now floated alone among the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful invasion fleet in galactic history. However, Admiral Chen continued, we will allow one ship to survive this engagement, one ship to return to hegemony space and deliver our message. That ship will be yours, Admiral. Zethrak felt a brief moment of hope until the human admiral continued speaking. Your weapon systems have been disabled. Your faster-than-light drive has been removed. Your navigation computer has been programmed with a course back to hegemony space using sublight engines only. At maximum speed, the journey will take you approximately 47 years. The Admiral's hope turned to horror as he realized the true nature of his fate. 47 years? 47 years to think about what you've done. 47 years to compose your report to the Hegemony Council. 47 years to consider whether attacking human civilians was worth the cost. Zethrak looked at his crew, 300 beings from various hegemony species who would now spend the rest of their lives traveling slowly through the empty void between stars. But that's not the worst part of your situation, Admiral Chen added, and Zethrak could hear something like dark amusement in her voice. The worst part is what's going to happen to the rest of the hegemony while you're making your journey home. What do you mean? Operation Cleansing Dawn wasn't just an attack on human colonies, Admiral. It was also a declaration of war against humanity. And unlike other species you may have encountered, humans don't simply defend and then forget. We pursue. We investigate. We locate every base, every supply depot, every ally that supported your invasion. The tactical display on Zethrak's bridge suddenly lit up with new information. Star charts showing the locations of hegemony facilities throughout the galaxy. As he watched in growing horror, red markers began appearing across the map, indicating human fleet movements. "How do you have this intelligence?" he whispered. "We've been preparing for this war for 18 months. Admiral, ever since our agents first detected your invasion planning, did you really think 12 different species could coordinate military operations without someone noticing? Human intelligence services have been mapping your entire infrastructure while you were positioning your fleets." The markers on the display continued spreading. Zethrak could see human forces moving toward hegemony shipyards, supply bases, communication relays, and even the home worlds of several allied species. "This is impossible. We have defensive fleets guarding all our major installations." "Your defensive fleets are currently dealing with some unexpected problems," Admiral Chen replied. "It's amazing how vulnerable fixed installations become when their supporting infrastructure suddenly stops working. Food shipments get delayed. Fuel deliveries are interrupted. Communication networks experience mysterious failures." As if summoned by her words, reports began flowing in from across hegemony space. Every major military installation was reporting supply problems, equipment failures, and coordination difficulties. The entire war machine that had taken decades to build was falling apart in a matter of hours. "You're conducting systematic warfare against our entire civilization," Zethrak accused. "Yes," Admiral Chen replied simply. "When you target human civilians, you're not just attacking our military, you're attacking our future, our children, our families. That makes it total war, Admiral. Not a territorial dispute or a political disagreement. Total war." The implications were staggering. Zethrak realized that while the hegemony had been planning to destroy 5 human colonies, humanity had been planning to dismantle the entire hegemony civilization. "The irony," Admiral Chen continued, "is that you could have avoided all of this. Humans are actually quite reasonable when it comes to territorial disputes. We negotiate, we compromise, we find solutions that benefit everyone involved. But when you threaten our civilians—" Her voice turned cold as winter in space. "When you threaten our civilians, we become something else entirely." Zethrak watched the tactical display as human forces reached their first targets, hegemony supply depots in the outer systems. The attacks were swift, precise, and absolutely devastating. Within minutes, facilities that had taken years to construct were reduced to floating debris. "Your General Varix tried to warn you," Admiral Chen said. "He tried to explain what happens when humans decide you're a threat to our people. But you didn't listen. You thought he was just a coward trying to avoid another fight." He was telling the truth. Every word of it. General Varix is one of the few alien commanders who understood what he was facing when he fought human forces. That's why he survived when most of his fleet didn't. That's why he tried to stop you from making the same mistake. The communications officer on Zethrak's bridge suddenly looked up in panic. "Sir, we're receiving reports from Hegemony Command. Human fleets have appeared in orbit around 7 different Hegemony worlds. They're not attacking the planets, but they're destroying everything else in the systems. Defense platforms, orbital facilities, civilian shipping." "The humans are making a point," Admiral Chen explained, apparently monitoring the same communications. "They want the hegemony to understand that this war could have been avoided, that choosing to attack human civilians was not just a tactical mistake, but a fundamental misunderstanding of what humanity represents in the galaxy." Zethrak stared at the displays showing the systematic dismantling of hegemony power across dozens of star systems. In less than 12 hours, centuries of military buildup were being swept away by human forces that seemed to be everywhere at once. "How many ships do you have?" he asked quietly. "Enough," Admiral Chen replied. "Humanity has been preparing for this possibility ever since we first encountered other species in the galaxy. Every time we've been attacked, every time someone has threatened our people, we've learned something new about galactic warfare. We've adapted. We've improved. We've become very, very good at this particular type of conflict." The truth was becoming clear to Zethrak. Humanity wasn't just another space-faring species with advanced technology. They were something unprecedented in galactic history, an entire civilization that had evolved specifically to survive total warfare. Their homeworld had trained them for conflict on a scale that other species couldn't even comprehend. "The hegemony will never surrender," Zethrak said, though his voice lacked conviction. "They don't have to surrender," Admiral Chen replied. "They just have to stop being a threat to human civilians." When the Hegemony Council realizes they've lost 90% of their military infrastructure in a single day, when they understand that humanity tracked down and eliminated every supporter of Operation Cleansing Dawn, they'll make the right decision. More reports flowed in from across hegemony space. Human forces weren't just destroying military targets, they were systematically dismantling the entire support network that made the hegemony possible. Trade routes were being interdicted. Communication networks were going dark. Even civilian infrastructure was being selectively targeted if it had any military relevance. "This is genocide," Zethrak protested. "No," Admiral Chen corrected firmly. "This is consequence. Genocide would be if we decided to eliminate the hegemony species themselves. Instead, we're eliminating the hegemony's ability to threaten anyone ever again. Your people will survive, your cultures will continue, but your capacity for interstellar warfare is being permanently removed. The final reports began arriving. Across 12 different star systems, the hegemony's military capability was being systematically erased. Shipyards that had built the invasion fleets were becoming expanding clouds of debris. Admiral after admiral was reporting the total destruction of their forces. 47 years, Admiral Chen repeated. That's how long you have to think about whether it was worth it. Whether attacking human families was worth losing everything your civilization spent centuries building. As the human fleets began departing from their various targets, they left behind a galaxy that had fundamentally changed. The hegemony still existed, but as a collection of individual worlds with no ability to project military power beyond their own systems. The other species that had supported the invasion found themselves facing a choice: make peace with humanity or share the hegemony's fate. One final piece of advice, Admiral, Admiral Chen said as the human communication began to close. When you eventually reach hegemony space in 47 years, tell them what you learned here. Tell them that humanity doesn't negotiate with civilizations that target our civilians. We don't show mercy to those who threaten our children. We don't accept surrenders from those who force us into total war. The communication ended, leaving Admiral Zethrak alone on his crippled flagship with a crew that would spend the rest of their lives traveling through empty space. Around them, the wreckage of Operation Cleansing Dawn drifted in slowly expanding clouds of metal and frozen atmosphere. But the real wreckage wasn't just the destroyed ships. It was the hegemony itself, a once mighty interstellar empire that had learned too late why General Varix had tried to warn them away from attacking humanity. The humans had kept their promise. The aliens hadn't been allowed to flee. And across the galaxy, other civilizations were already taking note of what happened when someone made the mistake of threatening human civilians. In the end, Operation Cleansing Dawn had accomplished something, just not what its planners had intended. It had demonstrated once and for all that humanity's reputation as Death Worlders wasn't just about their ability to survive hostile environments. It was about what they would do to anyone who threatened their home.